The question is, who are they fighting for? Who are they protecting? And see if you see yourself in this conversation. Next slide. So the 4 issue areas that we're going to drill down in are our civil rights, the economy, education, and healthcare. When we think about, next slide, when we think about our civil rights, we know that the road to civil rights and the road to human rights has been a long one, right? My colleague Jamal Watkins loves to talk about this slide because he talks about the trajectory of our road to rights. And he goes back to the Universal Declaration of Human Rights, which was a milestone in the history of human and civil rights back in December of 1948. Folks came together and they declared that there are a set of rights that we should all have and they should not be taken away. Things like having time off, right? Having time with your family, having access to clean water and food, right? And so when we think about these attacks, we want to make sure that we are remembering that the road that we're on is a long one and we've been fighting for a long time and we cannot allow folks to take us back. Next slide. So when you think about Project 2025, you kind of have to stop and think, how do you get such a comprehensive document? How do they hit every facet of our lives, right? Well, they're organized. Project 2025 is more than 50 and growing of the nation's leading conservative organizations joining forces to prepare and seize the day. The axiom goes, personal policy, and we need a new personnel is policy, and we need a new generation of Americans to answer the call. Now, when you say personnel is policy, you're like, well, what does that mean? That means that Project 2025 is a blueprint to bring in folks into our government at every single level from the federal government to make sure that this agenda is successful. So the next time we have a conservative president, they will have marching orders. Right now, we have stopgaps. We have hurdles. We have people who are like, no, that's not the law. That's not how things should go. Should this Project 2025 go forward? Should we have a new conservative presidency? Their goal is to remove all those stopgaps, to remove all those barriers, and to allow them to move forward with their conservative agenda. And that is why we must organize, that is why we must inform ourselves, and that is why we must fight. Next slide. So our major civil and human rights concerns with Project 2025. Again, they are attacking our Black and progressive government workers. Black workers are overrepresented in the federal government, right? So we are a large percentage of the workforce, and when they come to wipe us out and to replace with their conservative workers, that means that our communities will suffer, right? That's money taken out of our communities. That's money taken out of our pockets, and those are people that are now unemployed. But don't forget, they also want to take away social services. So you're unemployed and you don't have a way to get unemployment. And so the fundamental principle guiding the project is a plan to embed conservative-minded political appointees throughout the federal government. These are, quite frankly, yes men. They are prioritizing fighting racism, hear me now, racism against white Americans. Both Trump's Agenda 47 and Project 2025 plans to vow to get rid of anti-white indoctrination, affirmative action, diversity, equity, inclusion, especially the dreaded critical race theory. Now, these are all things that we have fought years to gain, to make sure that folks are educated, that we have fair access, and they are dismantling it. We don't have to wait for Project 2025. We see this happening now, right? We saw a Supreme Court decision that dismantled a portion of affirmative action. If they got it there, they're not going to stop. They also have a plan to stop talking about race and stop collecting data. I told y'all they want to gaslight us. So if you don't collect information, then you can't prove it happened. And so if you don't have the data on how many folks are being abused by the police, if you don't have the data on Black maternal poor health outcomes, then you can't say that there is a problem, right? So we have to make sure that we are keeping these systems in place and these safeguards. And then finally, the plan is to protect law enforcement above enforcing the law equally. They plan to stop the Justice Department's Civil Rights Division from investigating voter suppression and election interference. And we already know that that's not only is it coming, it's here. They're purging us from the rolls. They're changing voting locations. They will do anything they can to make sure that we can't vote, which is why not only do we have to educate ourselves on Project 2025, we have to educate ourselves on our voting process. We have to register, we have to make sure we're on the rolls, and we have to make sure we're showing up to vote. All right, so let's quickly talk about threats to our economy. Next slide. I'll go through these somewhat quickly because I want to get to the panel, but I want to make sure you all hear some of these threats. We've got threats to the Department of Housing and Urban Renewal. This would repeal the AFFH, or the Affirmatively Furthering Fair Housing. A lot of acronyms, but basically all of the policies that have been put in place to make things more equal, to make things more fair, they said, no, we don't need those. We've done what we're supposed to do. You've got access. Now, I don't know about you all, but I had a very hard time buying a house. And a lot of people do. Redlining is still a thing in the state of California. They just call it something else, right? So we have to make sure that these protections are protected. The Department of Labor and related agencies. I know my colleague, Mr. Reid is going to talk a little bit about that, but there are attacks on every aspect of our working lives. They want to revise the DEI revolution in the labor policy, eliminate racial classifications and CRT trainings, eliminate the OFCCP, or the Office of Federal Contract Compliance Programs. These are the folks who make sure employers doing business with the federal government comply with non-discrimination regulations, right? The Small Business Administration, they want to end the SBA direct lending. This is what gets our community going. As a small business, you need funds to start your business. If you get rid of those programs, we are disadvantaged. We already have less capital coming into our community, and when you get rid of programs like that, you take us further than back than ground zero, right? You're putting us underneath the table, and we just can't have that happen. And then finally, there are attacks on financial and regulatory agencies, the Consumer Financial Protection Bureau. They want to repeal Dodd-Frank Section 1071 and redefine deceptive, unfair, and abuse practices. This comes through in attacks on Department of Commerce, Treasury, the Export-Import Bank, the Federal Reserve, and the FTC, or the Federal Trade Commission. Next slide. Okay. Education. We in the Black community know that education is near and dear to us. It's important because it is the foundation for everything else we can do in life. If you can't get a good education, it's really hard to get a good job. If you can't get a good job, it's really hard to take care of your family, to buy a house, to buy food, to buy gas, right? And so education is foundational. And the threats to education are also quite shocking. They want to eliminate the Department of Education. They are calling for federal education policy to be limited, including the elimination of the Department of Ed, resulting in transferring control of education policies to states. I'm from Texas. I'm from the biggest school district in Texas, which is Houston, where you've seen the state take control of that school district, right? That should not be happening. And we don't want this to be the law of the land. There are also threats to impacts on HBCU fundings. We've currently seen a lot of funding flow into our colleges and universities, but we know that those can all dry up at the change of administration and under something like Project 2025. They want to take funding away from public schools, institute a Parents' Bill of Rights. We've seen what those Parents' Bill of Rights look like in Florida, right? We've seen where parents have gotten books banned that students should be learning. We've seen where parents can object, and all of a sudden our history can't be taught in schools because it's threatening, right? And so we have to know that these threats, they're not just coming, they're here, but they're coming on a larger scale if we don't stop it now. And then, reduced emphasis on DEI, which is diversity, equity, inclusion, and education, and student loan forgiveness programs. Project 2025 seeks to end the Biden-era loan programs through phasing out all existing programs. Next slide. So we know that every bit of progress that we've made, you can think about any progress we've made in our country for Black folks, and it's being pushed back in Project 2025. When it comes to our health, there's a direct assault on health equity. It cuts access to health care, lowers quality of care, and provokes food insecurity and hunger. These are calculated attacks on reproductive justice. They shrink the social safety net. So think about folks who need Medicaid. It cuts federal funding for states. It places time limits on lifetime caps to Medicaid coverage. We saw the lifetime caps go away as we got the Affordable Health Care Act, right? So we're just reverting back. Everything they're doing is taking us back. Going to the next slide. I just want to make sure that we'll talk about the call to action, but we want you to know that this is a lot of information, and you don't have to digest it all now. The NAACP has put resources together for you. So if you go to naacp.org, we've got policy positions. There's a toolkit that has sample language and graphics that you can share and make your community aware. There's talking points, and there's just a digital home for you to get more information. So I'd encourage you to continue to inform yourself. I gave you a small bit of a very large document that is a coordinated attack on our community, and I would encourage you to continue to dig and continue to fight back, because we cannot, I repeat, we cannot let Project 2025 go forward.
I thought you said you weren't an expert. Thank you, Phaedra. Is it okay if we use first names? Okay, all right, Charlotte, Ray, Phaedra, Tanae. Okay, so this is going to be a dialogue, but before I get started, as Phaedra was talking, I was flipping through my notes, and I wanted to remind us of the fact that Project 2025 has already started. And here in Tennessee, an example of that is Tennessee rejecting federal HIV funds and funding it through United Way. And this is more like a pilot, right? So you already know that Trump appointed 250 judges, lifetime judges, so it's already here. And one thing I was reminded of a couple of weeks ago is that even if we have a presidential election that results in a candidate that reflects our values, this is still not going to go away. It's going to be pervasive in the states. And so this is a marathon. This is not a sprint. Let's go ahead and start with Ray. You get the first question. How will Project 2025 impact a living wage?
There's a lot of discussion on a number of agencies actually going away under Project 2025. Wage and Hours Division, which culminates a piece each and every day of how wages are paid out, minimum wages across the country, and certain states actually that have their own set minimum wage, and cities that have put minimum wages in place. Under Project 2025, discretionary methods would be used by eliminating the authority of the Secretary of Labor. Secretary of Labor, Wage and Hours Division, National Labor Relations Act, and all those provisions actually cover that space. And when you start talking about the ability to have time and a half pay right now, currently over 40 hours when you work during the week. Under provisions of Project 2025, a corporation or an entity would have the ability to determine how that compensation would take place. Meaning, if you worked 60 or 70 hours, they may determine that hours that are above 40, the 20 or the 10 or the others, may wind up being your following weeks of compensation. Meaning that you may find yourself actually at home during that same time period, but being compensated for the hours, but not paid at a time and a half rate. That is part of the biggest part of the impact when you start talking about that. And a lot of us, when you look at what happens with regard to overtime compensation, that overtime compensation is economic empowerment for a number of us in our communities. That makes a difference in the ability to save for a vacation during a year, planning for new purchases for a family, planning for return back to school items, other things that are in place. Those things are significant to each and every one of us. But when we start talking about that type of adjustment happening federally, even the recent announcement that just happened in California, going to a living wage by 2025 at $25 an hour, that could be impacted because then the federal standards and state standards could actually be eroded by executive order. And a number of these pieces that are significant, when you start talking about this 925-page document that's there, a number of these items, because the conversation's already begun, they could be discussed in executive order and rolled out, not within the first 120 days. How about in the first 24 and 48 hours of an administration change? So when we always talk about the difference between the ballot box and your actual income, your home, your wallet, the impact of that wallet and your ability to spend and other pieces could change by the impact of a vote on November 5th and other votes that would take place. But the living wage piece is a piece that would impact a number of us immediately who are non-salaried individuals and who are dependent upon an hourly rate and dependent upon that hourly rate actually increasing each year. Employers also, as a result of this change that could happen under Project 2025, also could determine that they're going to start having market rates for wages, meaning your current rate may be too high for the current city and the current state and community that you live in. That rate could have actually been adjusted to a standard based on other employers that were in the area, and you actually were the benefactor of a higher wage rate because of another company or another organization's pay. That rate could actually be lowered. And Project 2025 would give executive order authority for employers to make those type of decisions. So it could be a very huge impact. And again, it's a reminder about what's actually taking place in real time.
Thank you. So you just reminded me of something, Ray. That last statement that you made about employers being able to adjust the salary down. And so for young people who are starting to think about getting out in the workforce, you might work from home because we have this remote workspace, right? So you might be living in California where it's a higher rate of living, and you receive a job from a nonprofit organization in Tennessee who's willing to pay you that California wage. But no, what they're saying is that even though you're living in California, you're still going to be paid that Tennessee wage. And so that's going to completely turn you upside down. So that's a great example. Ray, I was wondering if you can still go on and talk to us about, you have a labor background, so talk to us about the labor movement particularly and labor jobs. I know we hear about that in the news from time to time, but could you give us a more in-depth understanding of what's going on with regards to labor?
Well, labor always had this belief, and it goes back to a former UAW president, actually, Walter Reuther, and that was the bread box and the ballot box go hand in hand. And a number of you may be a little bit younger, and I am a little bit older now, but I know what the bread box is, and those of you may not know what a bread box is. It's the traditional box that was out of wood or out of steel or out of aluminum that sat on your counter. Now, often, if you could afford the loaf, that you had the bread to be able to purchase and place inside of that. Your ability to purchase that bread is your economic empowerment piece, and that's the piece where we say that they're both hand in hand. Labor is actually affected in a number of ways in this process. While labor has been able to bring up a number of different communities, always not that the organization that was next to them actually was represented by a union, but it empowered that union. The space that happens here with recently what's taking place in Chattanooga, what's happened in other related suppliers that have come as manufacturing has grown inside of this state and other states. The significant piece is organized labor has driven wages downstream. And when I say downstream, not dropping wages, actually impacting wages that are downstream. Related suppliers, nearby companies who prefer not to be organized have actually increased the wage rates for their employees as a result of an effort to not organize, not unionize, but to empower their workers and give them a voice and give them of the opinion that there is an increase that's there. But the labor piece and labor component of 2025 could be devastating for all of us. A number of things that were fought for all the way back to the 30s and 40s when you start talking about the National Labor Rights Act and other pieces that have moved and protected workers during that time frame, all could be eliminated. Public unions could be eliminated. And when I say public unions, we're talking about our teachers who are part of national and state associations. They are public unions. Firefighters are public unions. Police officers are members of public unions. in this space, public unions actually could be eliminated. TSA folks, for those of you who fly, and you see the nice TSA agent who's making sure that things are secure post 9/11, which we just also had an anniversary date on this past Wednesday. That agency could be privatized. There's been a number of efforts to make that agency privatized, but it would be a huge onslaught as part of what 2025 has stated to privatize that agency. Our union members who are also in the government agencies, Department of Justice, something Phaedra has mentioned with regard to investigations on wrongful terminations, wrongful charges, wrongful acts during voting. If those staff agencies are eliminated and no longer unionized, those who are directing their traffic and voice and message completely change each and every day in that space. Homeland Security, a number of agencies could be eliminated. And a number of us, like myself, I am a former Army veteran, and I know that there are those who have served in this room. The Veterans Administration is also a member of AFGE, American Federation of Government Employees International Union. They would be the first to be eliminated. And those of you who still work in government agencies and have government standards, the GS scale, under Project 2025, there would no longer be a GS scale. The impact of what you've worked for, what you've sacrificed in time, and your commitment for the civil service rights would be further impacted. So unionization, as we know, would no longer exist. 2025 would erode any efforts for card check. And those of you who are not familiar with card checks, that is when an employer makes a determination that they believe that they have a good understanding of where their workforce wants to be represented, and they are voluntarily willing to recognize union standing inside of that workspace. Project 2025 eliminates the ability to have card checks. Project 2025, as Phaedra also mentioned to you about the ability to capture any of this information about discrimination, wrongful things that have happened to you, while that's no longer being undocumented under 2025, you'd have no EEOC to go file a claim. You'd have no path or rights with a grievance procedure that would take you to arbitration. All of these entities would be eliminated under what we know as traditional peace. The biggest part out of this that was very shocking even to labor scholars is that Project 2025 and its overriding executive authority, while a location could have a collective bargaining agreement with an employer that may be lasted anywhere from 3 years or to 5 years, Project 2025 gives that employer the right to terminate the collective bargaining agreement and establish that there are new standards that should be put in place because the economy, the market, the conditions, their current products or performance have all changed, so they need to reset that marketplace. They need to change because of benefits. They need to change because of the ability that federal government standards have changed. And there's always a linchpin in all collective bargaining agreements that talk about the ability for changes when federal statutes or state statutes are otherwise impacted and they conflict with the collective bargaining agreement. And if that happens, Phaedra mentioned to you already about the Affordable Care Act. We've already heard from 46 minus 1, who now would like to be 46 plus 1 in the future, in another role, and he's made it real clear that he would like to change the Affordable Care Act. If the Affordable Care Act goes away, think about what happens for those who have that as collective bargaining provisions with health care. Think about what happens when the position was fought for many years and this was taken out of the Affordable Care Act, which was pre-existing health conditions. So all of those are key pieces for labor and great impacts of what could happen even for a location that had a collective bargaining agreement.
Thank you, Reid. That's a lot of information. And I do have a follow-up question maybe a little bit later. Charlotte, we're coming to you next. But before we get that, I neglected to let everyone know, we did have on the schedule Miss London Haynes, who's the Vice President of the Youth and College Division from West Tennessee. At the last minute, she couldn't be here because she had an illness in her family. But nevertheless, we have a lot of young people here. If you are a member of the Youth and College Division, would you please stand up? And if you have someone in your family who is college age or younger, would you please stand up or raise your hand? And I want the youth and college to keep standing. So if you have in your family someone that is college age or younger, raise your hand. All right. So while the 2025, you can put your hands down and you all can have a seat. Thank you. So this is a reminder that even though this has already started and the pressure is going to be going on, it's going to be our young people that are going to have to bear the brunt. So I'm very appreciative that you all are here because we need your ideas and your strategies in order to help make a change. But that being said, Charlotte, I'd like us to turn to the faith community. From your perspective, where is the faith community right now in terms of understanding the impact, the seriousness of the impact, and the desire to engage in this conversation?
Well, thank you for that question. I think that the faith community knows that this is a matter of life and death, and that the faith community also knows that it's not just about saving souls, but also saving bodies. And we're also able to come to the form of seeing that they're coming for us. They're coming for our people. And what I mean by that is that everything that we have done, prayed for, and asked for, and fought for, they're coming to take away. And so what we're going to have to do as a faith community is organize and able to see that it's not just about sitting in the pews, but we're going to have to take the church to the streets. And church in the streets means that we're going to have to knock on doors, and we're going to have to let people know that you can be both Christian as well as being political, because that's who Jesus Christ was. Jesus was a political prisoner. He fought against the law. He was executed by the Roman Empire. So we have to be able to see that there is a bridge between the law and the church. I know there's supposed to be a separation of church and state, but people of African descent, we don't have that luxury, because it was illegal for black people to be free. But the word says, whoever the Son sets free is free indeed. Yes. It was illegal for black people to learn how to read and write. But we said that if we're going to get the word, we're going to have to learn how to read and write. And it was through the church that a lot of our historically black colleges and universities were birthed. Today we know that there is banning on the books, so we're going to have to be revolutionary and say whatever books that they ban, those are the ones that we need to read. Yes. We know that affirmative action is under attack, and we need to put names and faces to people. The person that brought or came up against the affirmative action is by the name of Edward Bloom, B-L-U-M. I encourage you to look him up. As well as, Project 25, it comes out of the birth of the Heritage Foundation. I recommend that you find out their history as well. We also need to recognize that those that come in after us are very well organized. They already have at least 160 organizations and a $22 million budget that is coming after us. And I say that we can still be encouraged, because the same God that brought us from enslavement is the same God that is with us today. Yes. The same God that gave us the hands to build the pyramids is the same God that helped us to build the White House. And so with that being said, the faith community is going to have to catch on fire and be the one that leads and stop being the tailgate and be the headlight. The faith community is going to have to get some backbone, absolutely. I was thinking of something else, but thank you.
I'd like to, Charlotte, let me ask you this. So my minister last week, he said the church, our congregation is not a political organization, and he said, but we better get out and vote. So, but not everyone is like that. So for those faith leaders who might have apathy with regards to voter engagement, what are some strategies that we can think about to change that framework?
I mean, all we have to do is look at Reverend Dr. Martin Luther King as well as the Civil Rights Movement. It was birthed out of the Black church. Dr. King and all of those that were a part of the Civil Rights Movement met in the church first and then went to the streets. For again, as us as African descent, or those who identify as African, it was always the church or the soul, as W.B. Du Bois, who is the founder of the NAACP, is the soul of Black folk. So the soul of Black folk, it was in those hush harbors that we had to organize in order to get our freedom either on earth or in heaven, one way or the other. So I would tell those ministers that if you're saying that you would have followed Harriet Tubman or you would have followed Dr. King, if you're not doing what they did today, you wouldn't have done it then. So don't use the church as an excuse of not getting involved because you're not following that mandate. That's not who Jesus was. Jesus says, I come to set the captives free. Yes. So if you're following the word, then that should not be an issue. Because if we are not just going to go by the souls of Black people and not the bodies, then I say that you're hypocritical and you should get out the pulpit.
Okay, I've got another question for you, Charlotte. Because this is important. Phaedra and I were driving over here, and she's like, there's a lot of churches on East 3rd Street alone, right? So there's a church almost every corner in Nashville and Chattanooga alike. So let me ask you this. How can I phrase it? I'm just going to come out and say it. So we know, or at least I grew up learning and observing that 11 o'clock on a Sunday morning is the most segregated hour in the week, right? So we're all in this together. I also know that there are other ministers that might identify as a different race, and they are also preaching the word. But I don't know if they don't necessarily have the same lived experience that we do. So how do we sort of bridge the gap and engage in dialogue across faith leaders from diverse lived experiences?
Well, thank you. That's a very excellent question. And I want to remind our people that the Black church began because of racism. It was the Black church had to be created because we were not welcomed in the white churches. So I know my EME people are in the house that can testify to that. Yes. So I would say that in order for us to come together across walks of life, I would recommend the book by Jim Wallace that is entitled America's Original Sin. And in that book, he basically comes to the question, if we're talking about making America, should America be great again or should it be born again? Yes. Because if you're talking about racism is the original sin, we have not dealt with that. And so to come across the board with those that are of our white brothers and sisters, they're going to have to come to the reality and face the truth that DEI should not be words of defiance, but should be actions of call. Yes. So if we're talking about these kinds of things in the church, I will also let whites know that, a lot of whites are more white than they are Christian. And in order to be born again, then you're going to have to become more Christian than you are white. Yeah. And so going across the board for other faiths, I would say the same thing, that everyone is going to have to face the ugliness, the truth of the reality that racism still exists. That this is a racist country that was built on racism. In order to change that, you can't change anything if you're not willing to confront it. It is racist. And if you want to change it, then you're going to have to make those confessions. Confess your sins, repent, humble yourselves, and turn from your wicked ways.
Okay, I see we're preaching to the choir here. Okay, so we're going to go ahead and open it up for questions from the floor. There is a microphone right up here. If you are not able to, or you just need to be at your seat, but you still have a question, we can get someone to bring the microphone to you. But as you all come up here, this is the time to come on up to the microphone or either raise your hand. I'm going to give you a couple of additional details that I learned about that I just thought, really, what? So we talked about all of the changes to administrative departments, particularly education, also Department of Agriculture. So food inspections. So this is how Project 2025 will affect food inspections. Poultry, chicken, and meat sold across state lines must be subject to federal inspections now. Project 2025 would seek to remove the federal inspections, and meat inspections would be turned over to state monitors. Okay, so this is talking about our food, right? And so this is just something really, really basic. We talked about Title I serves children in a high poverty school. This will give states complete control. And then it was also mentioned before, used to Title VI of the Civil Rights Act is used to monitor adverse racial impact related to school discipline. These are our children, and now 2025 pushes to remove ability to address discrimination in schools with regards to school discipline. So those are just a couple more concrete examples. Miss Everlina Holmes, would you? Yes, thank you. I'm sorry? Okay.
Thank you, Charlotte. A lot of people in this room probably are not as old as I am. On my birth certificate, it says colored. I had to go, after graduating from college, I had to go 3 times to register to vote because I could not read, to the satisfaction of the registrar. Now, because we had to go on different sides of the building to register, the whites on one side, the blacks on the other. The door was locked. I had to bring a person with me who was already registered to vote. I don't know why. But at least I didn't have to count the jelly beans in a jar. This is in Alabama before the Civil Rights Movement. I was a part of the Civil Rights Movement. I am so happy to see these young people here today. Because if you don't know your history, you're bound to what? Repeat it. Now, let's get real. White people have known for 16 years that they were going to become the minority. That's what it's all about. By 2035 to 40, they will be in the minority. All these things that are being put in place is to make sure they maintain control. So I'm not going to take up too much of your time because you have other questions, but I want to thank you, and you better listen to what Charlotte said because she was right on target. And you need to know your history. I know mine. My grandmother lived to 116. She told me the history. I'm 90. I know my history.
Thank you. Okay, if you can make your way up, Because here's what the podium does. And thank you, Ms. Holmes. And I could not stop you because you are a respected friend of my mother's. But please come up because it's a reminder that a lot of us do have questions and that'll help us move through the next 20 minutes really quickly. Go ahead and ask your question.
Hi, my name is Audrey Ramsey, born and raised here in Chattanooga, Tennessee. And I left in 1989 in pursuit of a promotion in the corporation that I was working for, which was in the oil and gas industry. And in that time, I've lived all around the country. Are you familiar with the citizens' rights legislation and the content of that? Back in about maybe 15 years ago, when that was passed by the Supreme Court, allowing corporations to donate unlimited dollars to their candidate. So my question is to you, Reverend. Can you connect the dots on how Project 2025 is just leading up, or citizens' rights legislation has led us to where we are today with regards to salaries?
When you take a look at what happened over those 15 years, and when they always say you follow the money, you follow the money and where that money has moved with major corporations and the legislature and the legislative officials that they have backed, sponsored, or endorsed over that period of time, you find a message that's significant about where those corporations are. And those corporations have functioned in a space of some, at the time, being promotional and doing the right thing, and some that have not done the right thing 15 years ago and have actually gotten worse now. They're worse actors now because they've got the advocates that are in there pushing their message. They may not be the one that you see out when you hear Congress talking about something coming out of committee, or when you hear them talking about a specific vote on legislation. You won't hear that specific company, but you can best believe their lobbyist was in the back room. Their lobbyist was on Capitol Hill for 2 weeks before the vote, and they were making sure that they were delivering a message that, guess what? If you still want that endorsement, and if you still would like that funding that didn't get restricted by federal statutes and is allowed to continue without it being capped, those individuals continue to play the dirty political piece that we find ourselves in now. And they also are the leading candidates right now for saying we would like to remove the DEI in our space. Well, we have to remind them so that the next time somebody brings DEI up to you, you should remind them DEI stands for definitely earned it.
Yeah,
exactly.
Okay, is this a quick follow-up? Because we have several other questions in the audience.
Yes, a follow-up to that. Are you familiar with Michelle Alexander's book on the new Jim Crow?
Yes.
You spoke about privatization, and she addresses the privatization of prisons based on the disciplinary rates of high school black males,
Yes.
particularly.
Okay. Great. Okay, we have
Can you address that in
just
terms of?
in 5 seconds because we've got a lot of folks
Basic,
that have questions.
brief piece on that is that if you don't have any documentation that's tracking some of this information about the impact, the negative impact, you don't get a chance to address the right things. But when you're talking about that privatization, you're talking about specific communities, specific places around the country that would drive those prisons. And then they would have no federal control, no oversight or anything that's there. And individuals' terms could be extended greater than what they were actually sentenced to in those locations.
Thank you. Okay, here's the order of things. We have this gentleman that's coming up, the next gentleman that's sitting right here, and then I'm going to bring the microphone over here. If you have questions, if you can make it to the formal line right here, that would be helpful for us to keep it moving. Thank you. Go ahead.
Thank you. Great panel. I'm Tom Savage from the Cookeville-Putnam County branch. Not too long ago, we participated with an organization and addressed the subject of bad faith. It's about Christian nationalists and Christian white nationalists. There's two types of them. But my question is for you, my sister. And I saw that you had mentioned that you are of the United Methodist denomination. And I do appreciate the United Methodists. They've always had a creed for social justice. But my question is there in the United Methodist denomination an ecumenical effort to coalesce with other religious denominations to do battle with Christian white nationalists who are behind a lot of Project 25? Matter of fact, Donald Trump is probably a white Christian nationalist. So I say that I know that it needs to be done, but is there an effort through the United Methodists to connect the dots with other denominations to do battle with that? Because the black church, a lot of white churches don't understand that social justice is part of our makeup. It's in our DNA. And we're really struggling to help them understand that. They think we just should wait until Jesus comes. But that's not the point. But anyway, that was my question, and I appreciate you.
Thank you, Mr. Savage.
Thank you.
Yes, thank you again for that question. I would say yes and no, that there are some United Methodist churches that are organizing to speak out against white Christian nationalism, but then there are some churches that are a part of the white Christian nationalism. So, it's a two-edged sword. My thing is that as people of African descent, we don't have the luxury to wait on white people to catch up or try to allow them to see that this is wrong. We just got to keep doing what we're doing, and that is to hold on to the bloodstained banner and keep moving forward.
Thank you.
So I'm Dwight Smith. I'm Chattanooga branch of NAACP. Sister Williams, question for you. The 501c, I found that a lot of ministers or churches are under that 501c. Does that hinder the church from being involved in the community? Can you shed some light on whether churches are getting any form of governmental money that would tie their hands from being in the community?
The excellent question. He's talking about the faith-based initiatives or 501(c)(3)s, and in the hood we say that's FBI. That is not only tying their hands but closing their mouths. And I would say that as persons of the cloth, that we're not called to sit at Pharaoh's table. We're called to say, let my people go. And so if the money is tied to that, I would definitely have the church. We've always been under that restriction as well, but there's ways to get around it. I heard someone say that we are already in a trumped up situation. We've already been biding our time, and now it's time for a Kamala to come along.
Okay, we have a question here, then we're coming back to the podium. If you have a question, please line up at the podium.
My name is Johnny Holloway, and I have one question for the gentleman on the program. That is, how do the child labor laws impact by 2025? And I'd just like to give a little thought for us to carry out during this time. If you want to know how to vote, just tell everybody you'd rather vote for an AKA than a KKK.
And as a member of Delta Sigma Theta Sorority Incorporated, I take no offense.
Thank you, sir. The child labor laws would be eroded. They would no longer be in existence. That includes meat packing factories. That includes warehouses. That includes mining. You may have seen pictures many years ago when children were coming out of mines that were working. And you've seen children, because of age and other pieces, federal statutes have prevented them from working certain hours, certain locations, but meat packing, warehousing, parts distribution, manufacturing. There was a recent case that happened in Hyundai and Hyundai suppliers down in Montgomery over to Westport, Georgia, Montgomery, Alabama, over to Westport, Georgia, where the suppliers had children underage, actually high school kids, violated child labor laws, and those suppliers were recently sued. And because of the current administration, because of the effort of others who did get out the vote, the administration addressed that. Those agencies fined those particular companies, and those companies no longer have the right to have those individuals in there. But Project 2025 would remove those provisions of the law, and it would allow children underage or younger than adults to actually be inside of these workplaces and spaces, potentially injuring themselves and injuring their life as they would know it as they moved forward.
Thank you. Now, as this gentleman steps up, I know that there are members of the Youth and College Division that have a question. So you all get together, figure out who's going to come up to the podium to ask the question, but your voices need to be heard, okay? So we're going to reserve a spot for you right after the gentleman in the dashiki. Go ahead, please, sir.
How's everybody doing? My name is James Robinson. I've been living in Chattanooga for 14 years. I'm from Chicago. I wanted to know how important do you think it is? Oh, I'm here on behalf of the UAW, Local 42. So some of you may know this is the third time we tried to get the union in Volkswagen. We finally got it this year. So glad my coworkers finally wisened up and voted this time. So I just want to know, how important do you think it is to have union representation here in Chattanooga?
That is a very good message, and for those of us who have been that are in this room and supported you, we applaud you and your coworkers for achieving a 75% victory, which was huge. And there's a number of us in here who were part of the ground up from the very beginning, from your first election in 2014. It's so significant in you being organized and being recognized and joining the other labor force members who are in this area, in this state, and in this country. It is a chance for the corporation to no longer make a determination of when you're going to get fed. And the biggest piece was you were able to have a voice at the table. That voice will be locked into a collective bargaining agreement. And each one of those votes, as they always say, there can be success out of tragedies. And out of each one of those tragedies came a success. When we look at what happened in 14, and when you look at what happened in 19, and even now, every one of those empowered the workforce inside of the space called those four walls of your plant's facility. Each one of those also brought additional suppliers into this community and also provided new manufacturing and other types of jobs that didn't exist in this area. So the growth of your facility has also, as I talked about earlier, that trickle down and downstream effect has brought jobs and new opportunities for others in this space. But the biggest piece of it is it's allowing you to have a voice that will be able to lock things down. And even with provisions of Project 2025, think about the workspace that will not be collectively bargained and will not have a bargaining representative that immediately goes into disarray, where you have the ability to challenge under federal statutes and other provisions because you would have a labor union. But it's significant in the state in growing power. There was a centralized power piece, and while there were unions that were in the Chattanooga area down to Georgia, there's a heavy presence that always was in West Tennessee and in Middle Tennessee. This is a chance to show East Tennessee can grow. East Tennessee can have a voice inside of the workplace. And I think we applaud you and your coworkers for standing up. Each and every time that you also stood up, when you had a problem and you challenged what was actually taking place with management, you notice what happened. They changed who the plant manager was. They changed who the personnel director was because they knew your voice was getting louder and louder inside that space. But understand, y'all were inside those four walls. You had a state conference president and a number of others that are in this community who were advocating for you each and every day in other spaces inside of the state and across the country.
Thank you.
A quick follow-up.
Quick, because we're up against time.
A couple years ago, I was actually fired from Volkswagen because we don't have a union and stuff like that. And I was, going around telling people what happened, and that got a lot of votes from people that said they were voting no to voting yes. So that was that's the reason why I'm so outspoken about it, and led the charge and stuff like that. So.
Thank you. Madam President,
you helped me get my job back too. So.
Madam President, we're going to go over 5 minutes to accommodate these last 3 questions. Okay.
Thank you all for doing this. My name is Fitzgerald Mann. I'm the Haywood County Branch President. From all 3 of you, how do you combat the ignorance, even though we all know about 2025? For our young people and folks my age that say, it doesn't impact me. How do you combat that and do it in a way that doesn't drive them away, but gets them to the table to listen to it? And one of my things is I don't attack, I ask the question. But how do you guys, because I know we all deal with it, how do you address it?
Yeah, I'll start off. That's a great question. And one thing I said before is a lot of the work that I do really is about messaging. And if you come to me and you just yell at me that I'm wrong, I'm absolutely not listening to you. I'm probably going to walk away. You have to meet people where they are and have conversations. It also feels a little bit unbelievable that you could just overhaul the entire government, right? So you have to take this information and break it down into bite-sized pieces, and you have to understand what people care about. Again, I said education is very essential and central to our community because we know it's the basis for a lot of other things, and there are a lot of rich examples. So if you're talking to a parent, right, let's have a conversation about your child's education. Did you know that they want to get rid of the Department of Education? Well, here's what that looks like, and here's where it's happened already, right? We've got to actually walk people through the process to say, if you care about education, and you understand that they want to take, or you don't understand that they might want to take away the Department of Education, here's an example of how they've done it in Texas. Here's an example of how they've done it in Florida. Here's what they're trying to do here in Tennessee. And really understand what motivates folks. Because if you talk to me about something I don't care about or I don't see the impact, you can talk until you're blue in the face, but it's not going to resonate with me. So I always say we have to come to a place of understanding. Like you said, ask those questions, understand where people are, and help them connect the dots. So we in this room have to make sure we understand as many of those points as possible, and then be able to lift them up to talk to folks. Because I can say this with clarity because we've done research on it. When folks are informed about Project 2025, when they understand the threat, they are motivated. They're ready to act. They register, they vote, they tell other people about it. And so we need to get to the point where folks are informed and they're able to evangelize it to other folks.
I'll be very brief. And she's nailed it on the head. The one piece is reminding them of the practical examples that are out there. And when we take action and have a voice, remind them about January 6th. Nobody thought anything close to January 6th could happen. But because of security measures and other pieces that did happen, it avoided someone actually being hanged. Think about that. There were gallows that were already in place on the west side of the Capitol. That day moved that quick. So when you remind people that things can change in real time under administration and different things that can happen. The other piece, and I'll be very brief on this, the DEI piece. State of Florida implemented a piece with regard to anybody who was receiving state funding that the DEI provisions would apply, and they had to eliminate those. Florida State and the University of Florida, the athletes challenged that. And then internal funding emerged from alumni to support the DEI programs remaining in place inside of both universities. These were college students who took a stand and said, hey, guess what? If this is what you're going to do and this is who you represent, we won't be part of this university. So we applaud those who have got to see real examples where they actually can find themselves in place, and those students in Florida found themselves in place. And I can also remind you of one thing. Think about what happened in the civil rights movement, and think about a young fellow that was part of that movement that didn't pass that many years ago, and that was Congressman John Lewis. A young man was involved in that movement that really was based on a lot of things that were with the church and a lot of adults, but that was a younger generation that was there, that was part of a movement. He actually took a seat back and he didn't try to move forward over those others. He became involved and engaged because he saw where the bigger picture was and that they needed to have a voice inside that place as well.
Okay. Thank you. Next question.
Good morning. I'd like to thank the panel for bringing this to our attention. I'm Ernest Newsom. I have 22 years of military. I'm a retired naval officer. I would just like to ask, what impact is this Project 25 going to have on active duty military as well as veterans? Veterans, as we know, are denied many of their benefits already. So what impact is this going to further enroll these benefits that we have been entitled to when we've raised our hand? I'd like your response on that. Thank you.
Hi. Okay, Chaplain Newsom, as I know him as from the ranch from before, two significant pieces out of that is, one, there's already plans to use the military and federal and state police in efforts of rounding up immigrants or challenging where immigrants are. That includes violating what now has been protected space, church, schools, hospitals, and the like, where military could actually come in and potentially detain, question, or others, anyone who they thought they potentially might be an immigrant, including you, just by attire alone. And then you would have to determine and prove otherwise. Benefits, and we talked about the VA and the other administrational pieces that are there. If there's not data that's being collected, there's not any ability with what happened. Older veterans who were part of Vietnam, who were part of Agent Orange. Most recent, the PAC Act that determined a number of members who were in Afghanistan, in Saudi Arabia, that they actually did get impacted by chemicals, by testing, by blast, and other things that were in those space. If that data is no longer collected because the agency now, by executive order, has been eliminated, our veterans and others would no longer be able to obtain those benefits. Our VA hospitals would be privatized because the federal government would no longer manage them, and then they would be privatized for profit and for gain of those agencies now that are running those services. So we could see the elimination of what we know as traditional benefits for those who have retired, and those who are on active duty could find that their active duty is no longer what they signed up for, but now they are part of an executive order to go out and round up individuals, whether that would be on the border, whether that would be building the wall that never got built during 4 years, or whether that would be someone who is out here just randomly stopping individuals when things are taking place, or finding yourself on true duties like January 6th.
I will also say, I just did a quick search, militarytimes.com goes into details and sort of has the links to Project 2025 on how it's going to impact active military, sort of those outside of how the military is going to be used, how those individuals will also be impacted. So, thank you.
One quick additional piece, no COLAs, because most of us in the military know about the cost of living allowance. All of those get halted. The pension provisions, all are halted.
COLA stands for
cost of living allowance, or cost of living allowance, and it's an adjustment piece based on what takes place in the country and the economic pieces. But COLA and locale pay, which is paid for military based on if you're in California, based on if you're stationed in Germany, based on if you're stationed in Hawaii. All those locale pays all could be eliminated, because then executive orders could determine what the actual compensation is for those who are serving and those who have served.
Thank you. You have the podium.
My name is Imani Hall, and I'm from Clarksville, Tennessee.
Wait,
And
could you speak up just a little bit?
My
Ms. Hall?
name is Imani Hall. I'm from Clarksville, Tennessee, and I'm here to ask, what can I tell my older peers who think voting is a waste of time?
Charlotte, would you take that? And then Phaedra, I'll let you answer that as well.
I would say to your peers that I know they have heard a lot of times that our people died for the right to vote, but I would like you to let them know that our people died for freedom, and inside that freedom is the right to vote. If they don't vote, then they don't have a voice, and so they have become voluntary enslaved, meaning that they're giving someone else the ability to make the decisions for them, that without the power of the vote and them exercising that vote, that they are saying that they are incapable of making decisions of their own, that they don't have the spirit of what our ancestors called Kujijagalia, which is self-determination, that they are putting the power in the hands of someone else. And so when you give your power to someone else, then they make decisions about not only who you are, but what you are. And when they have done that, when they call you criminal, then you have given them the power to do so. And I would tell your peers to tell them that they do have a voice, that they do matter, and that their vote is not just for them, but for the future generation. I think that we have to get out of the ideology of I and welcome the mentality of we, meaning that none are free until all are free. Yeah.
Thank you.
But you are the voice, you are the light. So what you have, you're able to speak to your peers because you're closer to them and they're able to see you. So I pray that the ancestors in God give you the wisdom and the discernment to speak to your peers, and you be the voice of reason, and they will listen to you. Yes.
Thank you, Ms. Hall. We have one last question, and I'm going to let Ms. Phaedra answer the last question.
Hi, I'm Madison Angel from the Hamilton County branch, the Youth Council branch. I was wondering, what things can I say to my friends to educate them? I feel like I kind of have an idea of what I believe in, and I think they just think it's stupid, but I want them to have a voice and know this is important and that it involves us too.
That is a great question, and I'm gonna build off of what was just said, because we have a lot of conversations around what is the message that gets those who don't want to vote or participate. And the pushback that I get from our youth and college staff who are working with youth in college every day is that message of our ancestors and what they've gone through doesn't resonate with them. I don't fully believe that's true, but I think there's nuance to that, right? I think that if you are not learning your history, if you're not experiencing it, then it's easy for it to not matter because you don't know what you don't know, right? So I think there's a call to action to make sure that we are educating ourselves as peers so that you're having conversations and learning with your peers about the history that's come before. But I also think we as older folks, elders, I'm an elder millennial, that we have to acknowledge that times have changed for our youth. They have access to information in a way that we never did. They have, computers in their phones and they have access to information and mis and disinformation very easily. So I would say we should look to you to see what it is that you care about and how do we work with you to point out the policies that are impacting what you care about. I think about the big uproar around TikTok being shut out of our country. I've never seen more young people active and vocal about a potential policy than something like that, something that's very personal to them. And so how do we start to relate other things that you all care about? How do we lift those up? So I would say, to answer your question, first of all, stand on your voice because it is important and it is powerful. So even if you think your friends think it's stupid, you're not. You're here when other folks are probably in bed right now, and you are informed. And so lean into your voice and talk about the things that you all care about, and we can then help you with the policies that impact all of the things that you care about.
Thank you.
And Phaedra, as President Sweetlove makes her way to the podium, Phaedra, would you please help us understand how the branches across the country are going to stay connected regarding Project 2025?
Yes, so as we wrap, the National wants to be a resource for our branches as you are fighting against Project 2025. So we have a starter. It's a very large document and there's a lot of nuance, but we have a lot of information for you and a lot of tools for you to be able to spread the word and share the information. But we want to continue to be a resource. So if there's something missing, if there's some nuance, if there's some research you need, definitely work with your state conferences, but the state conferences can work with national to make sure you all have what you need, because we don't know what you need until you tell us. But the big thing is we've got to have a repository and a learning space of how we're all fighting back against this. It is not an easy battlefield, but collectively, that's the only thing that's ever brought us over. So my challenge to you is to articulate what you need from the national, continue the fight, and together we can win.
Thank you, Dr. Williams, Ray Curry, Phaedra, one of my favorite people, moderator Tanae. Thank you, 2nd Baptist on 3rd Street. Thank you for, I need to read what's in my hand, for hosting us. Thank every one of you for coming. I encourage you, that's Harold Carter, I'm trying to make him be Lance Armstrong. But you got work to do. You know how you get a work assignment when you really go to a workshop or something? You got an assignment. I said it before, let me say it again. Your assignment is to get on your phone, get on your cell phone, get on your social media platform, contact 10 folks that you feel like do not know what you just know, that are not registered to vote, and ask them to contact 10 folks to get them registered to vote. Our pastor the other night said, when we were at Orchard Knob, he said something. He said, we can't sit this one out. We can't sit this one out, guys. You must go vote early. I talked about early, and I'll keep saying, check your registration status. Ask the folks that you're going to contact to check their registration status. Our Secretary of State already told us he was going to purge thousands of folks. They're not kidding. Your polling places are not in the same place. So make sure before October 7th that you have checked your status and you know that you can vote. And then beginning when is October 16th? Is that October 16th? Go vote early, guys. Vote early. I'm challenging all faith groups, all churches, mosques, synagogues. Use your transportation method. Use your vans, your cars, etc., and take folks to the polls. If this happens, it's on our watch, guys. If this happens, it's against these babies. You understand? A lot of you not old as me, and some of you older than me. You just don't tell it. But we don't have as long to endure in it. But I want to make sure I left it right for them. We cannot allow this to happen on our watch. Thank you all so very, very much. It's been wonderful. At this time, I'm going to ask Reverend Field to come up, and except for the 2nd Baptist Church, you all know us. You know NAACP don't never have no money. We spend all our money trying to do advocacy stuff. But I want to present this Conference Support Award presented to 2nd MD Church, the Reverend Ernest Reid Jr., pastor the 78th Annual State Convention of the Tennessee State Conference of NAACP, September 12th through 14th, 2024. Thank you all so much. We appreciate it.
Thank you so much on behalf of Second Baptist. We're so grateful.
Thank you. All right, that was closing remarks. Let me see. I have to pick who I'm going to do. I did say thank you to all of you. Thomas Savage, where is he? Come here and give me a benediction, because see, you ain't gonna talk all day.
It's going to be short and sweet, y'all. Can we go to the Lord in prayer? Father, we thank you for this time and for this place, Lord. We thank you, Lord, that we have been touched by the panelists, and we leave here with great rhetorical value to take it to the streets, Lord, to have impact on our communities. So, Father, we just ask for your divine touch, Lord, that we go with you, that the fire goes before us and burns up all the enemies, and the hills melt like wax in the presence of the Lord. We love you, we adore you, Lord, and we're just going to keep on keeping on in your name. May all the saints of God say, amen. Amen.